Hello, everyone. Good evening. Aaron, Canadian Looney. We've got a great show lined up. Oh my God, so many things went down this week. But what we're going to show here really is a committee video. Before that, we've got a couple of other videos to lead into that. Let's get it going. Good to see y'all.
Hey everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
And now for this news flash.
Can I say something to all the people who thought I was a loser, Chuck?
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named Justin. What could possibly go wrong?
I made a mistake, and I'm sincerely sorry.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am.
The worst that works.
The one we call Canadian. Canadians.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
We see the case of the dirtbag Tibor Organo, who shot a police officer in the stomach yesterday while he was out on bail after having been arrested for 24 offenses he committed while he was out on probation. When will this government finally accept that their hug-a-thug, catch-and-release system is putting our people at risk?
People need to wake up, the politicians need to wake up and assist the police.
The official leader of the official opposition used the word dirtbag. Now, he used it in relation to someone accused of a crime who was out on bail. It is disturbing to me as a member of parliament to hear other members of parliament use names and slurs towards constituents of all of ours. These are Canadians that we're talking about.
I'd just like to put on the record that I am very comfortable calling a cop killer a dirtbag. Thank you.
Who goes first?
Last time you guys were up here for this inquiry, you talked about how you had opened some files related to the past two federal elections. Can you give us an update on the status of those? Are they still open? Have you closed them? Or will we get any update anytime soon on those investigations?
Yeah, well, you know that if any ongoing files that we're not going to discuss, but we do have ongoing files.
Why can't you provide a little more details? I believe the testimony was that there has been progress, that for example, in regards to Chinese police stations, that the illegal activity stopped. What illegal activity did you stop? Providing those details would reassure the community as to progress.
Well, and there's a fine line with providing that information, right? Because individuals who are charged have a right to have a fair process in the courts. And there's a balance with what's to disclose and what can't be disclosed. When they go to the court, it's full disclosure, so then the information gets out. But sometimes we can't always disclose the information of what we're investigating.
Can I ask you about your shift to a greater emphasis on disruption instead of just collecting evidence for prosecution?
Not to me, to him.
So I would be happy to discuss that. I would not characterize it as a shift to disruption. What it is a shift or a reinforcement of the focus being on actions that lead to greater public safety and more significant impact. So it's not like we are shifting to or away something. We are simply saying that prosecution is not the gold standard meaning how we're going to be measured on whether or not we've had success. We're going to employ and have been employing more recently all of the possible options and tools, which would include disruption as well as other things, to have a greater public safety impact.
What's examples of disruption, just so you can explain to Canadians what that means? I mean, you talked about parking police cars. I think Mr. Gahem must have mentioned that earlier last year. Parking police cars in front of the alleged police stations. Is that invisible? Is that, give us some other examples of disruption.
So I'll be cautious in getting into some of the key examples, but one of the things is being visibly present, as you said. The other is working with partners that have authorities, whether it be CBSA, IRCC, Elections Canada. I'm having a blank here on.
I guess generally it's other government departments who can operate in that space and are probably better positioned to do the disruption than the organization. As Mark mentioned, we've been looking for the gold standard, but sometimes you don't get there, and disruption is probably sometimes a better tool, and that's where the community has to come together and see who's better positioned to do that disruption.
Jasper communities say they feel left out in the cold, that they're not being followed up with. You said today you would try to address that. Can you give us more details on what you're doing to assure them that you will follow up?
So we have testified about a broad range of activities that we are undertaking and engaging with the community. I can tell you that there's members across the country that are engaging with the community 7 days a week. They're not taking weekends off. They're going in, they're engaging with those people. We're creating products for the community. We're tailoring it for their languages. As we testified, there's 11 different languages in some of the more recent work that we've done. The actions that we took in some of our investigations that we talked about as well it has garnered additional confidence in us, and we've seen the results of that, where problems that have not been reported to us in the past are now being reported to us. We're receiving feedback from members of the community that they're grateful for actions that we've taken, and they're grateful for the interest that we are taking. I spoke a little bit about PS 752, and I want to go back to that for a minute, because I can tell you that we have a large number of members of the RCMP and our integrated units, and it's important to say that our integrated national security teams are made up of RCMP and police of jurisdiction at a municipal and provincial level, and they have engaged with family members across the country, and in some cases those family members are in dire need of assistance and engagement and an ear, and that staff hears about all those problems, they absorb those problems, and it does have an impact on them, and they're dedicated to that service and helping protect Canadians and making Canada safer and making people feel safer.
Some clarification on Commissioner Duhame's comments. He said charges. Are there charges pertaining to your investigation of Chinese police stations?
I didn't say charges. You were asking me how come we're not releasing information, and what I said that people have a right to a fair trial, and that's why when the charges are laid in a criminal investigation, there's full and frank disclosure, and that's when the information comes out. So I didn't say there were any charges laid.
Can you give actually a little more information about this? In terms, you said disruption. Have you, the individuals who you were looking at, who have not been named, who we cannot identify, are they permanent residents? Are they foreign nationals? Are they diplomats? And have you sent any names for possible potential diplomat or staff for foreign affairs to possibly have their credentials revoked?
So we've been very clear, we're not going to speak about ongoing investigations, and
who are you investigating?
I just got a question then. Can I ask you, 752, you talked about needing a layered approach when dealing with the victims. What does layered approach mean?
So that is both an investigative approach, but also a support approach. So we are working with them to hear their concerns, not just about the criminal elements. We're hearing about their their personal situations, additional needs that they may have, and then we are an ambassador on behalf of Canada to the rest of the government departments to make sure they are aware of what's going on. Then we have the actual investigation from a domestic perspective and the activities that we've done there, the work that we're doing to support more historically than currently with Ukraine, given the situation in Ukraine, but also our support to justice in the International Criminal Court work that is underway that has also been very public. So multiple levels.
I'll just come back to you. To a slightly different topic, but the RCMP is receiving documents, whether you want them or not, from the House of Commons on the Sustainable Technologies Development Fund. Can you tell me a bit more? Are you afraid that this is the House of Commons interfering in police work and trying to direct the police with these documents?
I'm not going to comment on that, and other than the fact that we did receive the documents, and the investigation is ongoing, so I'll limit my comments to that.
Is there an investigation?
There is that we confirmed. Mark and I have confirmed in front of the committee that there are investigations ongoing. So,
on the Chinese police stations, one thing that wasn't clear in the testimony: are there currently Chinese police stations operating in Canada?
I wasn't listening.
That again falls into part of our ongoing investigation. I'm not speaking about it at this time.
But can you reassure Canadians and Chinese Canadians that there are none of them operating?
I can reassure Canadians and the Chinese community that the RCMP is actively investigating the matter, the topic, the nature of behavior, as well as a broad range of foreign interference activity in Canada from multiple countries. It is a problem that we have demonstrated through our action and has been referred to as decisive action at the time, and we are continuing our efforts in that space, and I'm hopeful that that does reassure Canadians that we are aware of the problem and we're actively involving in a broad range of things. There's a lot of attention.
The RCMP said they'd shut them down.
So again, I'm not confirming or denying anything. What I'm telling you is that we have active investigations into foreign interference occurring in Canada. There's a lot of focus on the Chinese police stations. I think you need to take a step back and look at this from a broader range of foreign interference and foreign actors.
I think I made the motion to have Ms. Nicholson appear, and I think I don't see, we've already had Mr.
Simply yes or no, sorry. Yes or no for Mr. Cousineau to be.
No, I'm okay with.
This is the committee meeting, like a pretty exciting one from Thursday. Let's watch.
Okay.
Just Ms. Nicholson joining us.
Okay. The ayes have it. Mr. Cousineau, you're welcome to join us.
They have it with Julie. They've all said.
Sir?
Just a math question.
Very short comment. Thank you for that, first of all, to all the colleagues who supported us. Prior to the meeting, I informed you and the clerk that Minister will be appearing on November 7th. That was my mistake. She will actually be appearing on November 5th. So, Mr. Clark, you were 100% right. I made a mistake. It is November 5th that the Minister will be showing. So that was a mistake on my part. I just wanted to correct.
Wonderful. That's great news. I appreciate you following up on that.
Thank you.
So the 5th and the 7th then.
Point of
Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, so my understanding is that this committee passed a motion that no witnesses can be added without the committee having duly considered that in advance. That there was quite a bit of consternation about that. This witness, Mr. Cousineau, has appeared before the committee as a witness before, so he's being recalled today without it appering on the meeting notice. We have Ms. Nicholson who's been called specifically to answer questions. So Mr. Cousineau has not been requested to be here by the committee. So is it going to be the practice going forward that we can just summon people out of the gallery to ask them questions? And if so, are we going to do that today? Are we going to pull other people from the gallery? This is a very unusual practice. It's, I don't think, a good one, to be clear, and it needs to be understood that if this is sustained, that Mr. Cousineau sits at the table, that unless questions are directly given to him, that he's not permitted to speak. So there's no questions that he can answer unless they're put directly to him. The committee didn't ask for him to be here.
I appreciate that. And on this point of order, We have in the past, in the 9 years I've been on this committee, we will ask for a department or a person, other people will attend with them or in its stead. I'm fine ruling that to allow Mr. Cousineau. We do have that rule. It was not the others on anyone else on the motion, but it was a request from Global Affairs and committee has approved it, so I'm good with it. So we'll continue.
So Mr. Cousineau is not permitted to answer questions
You
if
do
they're
not.
directed
You
to
do
him.
not have to ask him questions. If you're directing the question or anyone's directing the question at Ms. Nicholson, we would expect Ms. Nicholson to respond. If we ask questions of Mr. Cousineau, I expect Mr. Cousineau to respond and not Ms. Nicholson. If we're fine then, we have a 5-minute opening statement from Ms. Nicholson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, honorable members. I am pleased to be here today in support of the committee's important work to ensure accountability and full transparency of government operations, including those of Global Affairs Canada. I will speak today first to my role as Chief of Staff to the Associate Deputy Minister, and second to the context and content of 2 emails dated June 17th and July 25th of this year. Turning to my role as Chief of Staff within the Associate's office, I sometimes liken my job to that of an air traffic controller. I serve a coordination function, providing oversight of the Associate's schedule and overseeing the flow of information between the department's subject matter experts and the Associate's office. My work supports senior officials, enabling them to do their jobs effectively. On occasion, I also serve a liaison function between the department and the Minister's office to provide an initial overview or quick update on a file. The Minister's office may then ask for a full briefing by the experts who manage the file on a daily basis. Here, I summarize the best information available at the time as provided by the file experts. C'est dans cette capacité de... It was in that liaison capacity that the June 17th and July 25th emails of interest were drafted, so I'll now turn to the context and intent of that correspondence. 14th, 2024, the Minister's Office requested information on the Department's decision to sell Canada's official residence for the consulate in New York. That request focused on the sale of the property originally purchased in 1961 and sought confirmation that all due policies and procedures had been followed. After gathering information from the subject experts, I provided an initial overview response on June 17th. The intent of that email was to clarify and explain why the department was selling the official residence, communicate that all proper policies had been adhered to, including confirmation that the head of mission was aware of the process as per standard departmental practice. The email summarized the information provided by the subject leads at the time of the request. One sentence in the summary of this full-page response focused on the sale of the official residence, did not clearly differentiate between the role of the mission employees and the role of the head of mission, the Consul General. Consul General, buying a replacement property. The email did not state that the Consul General was involved in the decision-making process, exercised influence, or signed for any transactions related to the process. In hindsight, more precise language could have been used to avoid any misunderstanding. That clarification was provided on July 25th. As the detailed email on July 25th clearly shows, the consul was not part of the approval for this overall process, the selection of a replacement property, or of the property purchase. The consul was only shown the property selected to replace the official residence after the bid to purchase was already accepted. In conclusion, the detailed study and examination of records related to this file demonstrated that all correct policies and procedures were followed throughout this process, with the end result being to relocate the residence to a smaller, more cost-effective property. Je suis prête à répondre. I look forward to clarifying any remaining questions that the committee may have.
You said both CNGNY, HOM. Can you just give those acronyms for us quickly?
Certainly, CNGNY refers to how we refer to the consulate.
And HOM is?
The head of mission.
Right. both CN, GNY, HOM, and staff have been instrumental throughout this process, with the HOM providing the green light for the selection of the new residents. Did you personally have knowledge of Mr. Clark's personal involvement, or was that relayed to you? And if someone related to you, who was that?
Mr. Chair, as I stated in my opening remarks, my role is to summarize the information that is provided to me at the best available information at that time.
Okay, who provided the information to you?
In gathering the information to convey and respond to the Minister's office, I engaged with the property branch.
Okay, who in the property branch?
Mr. Chair, my interaction was with Robin Dubois, the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Property Branch.
And that's the only person?
Mr. Chair, I also engaged with members of his team, including the Director General for Policy and Planning of the Property Branch.
And that is?
That person is Frank. And apologies to Frank, I won't be able to say his last name correctly, Huzang Ngabe.
On July 24th, this committee passed a sweeping accountability motion on this $9 million condo purchase for a Liberal insider during a cost of living crisis here in Canada. And then the following day, you issued a bogus correction to your June 17th email. And in that correction, you say that neither the head of mission was, and you say PRNMY nor CNGNY was part of the selection or approval process for the overall process or the property purchase. And so just so we're clear, you wrote this email that I'm referring to from July 25th, 2024, and you wrote the email that I previously referenced on June 17th, 2024. Those, I accurately quoted you in both?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I drafted those emails.
Okay. So in the first email, ma'am, you say both CNGNY, HOM, and staff have been instrumental throughout the process, with the HOM providing the green light for the selection of the new residents. That's not a typo. It's not a comma instead of a semicolon. That's very deliberate language. You're the head of mission providing the green light. Who instructed you to issue the correction that you issued on the 25th, the day after the motion was passed by the committee?
Mr. Chair, no one instructed me to make a correction.
Okay, so you'll have to elaborate, ma'am. The timeline is beyond curious. June 17th, you explicitly say the head of mission greenlit the project. July 24th, the committee issues the invitation for Mr. Clark to appear, and the next day, you suddenly your mind is cast back more than a month to issue a correction to the email that you sent, just of your own volition.
Mr. Chair, as I said in my opening remarks, the term green light, well, first I think it's important to remember the context in which the first email was drafted.
With all due respect, ma'am, the question was about the genesis of the so-called correction email that you sent. Did you do this entirely of your own undertaking without discussion, consultation, or instruction with anyone?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I work with the best available information provided at the time. After issuing the initial June 15th or 17th email that was, as I mentioned, an initial overview, the Office of the Associate requested the leads to go through and pull together a more detailed chronology of events. And once that information was available, I relayed that information to the Minister's office. No one asked me to correct anything. I relayed the best available information that was presented to me at the time.
Who told you that Mr. Clark was not involved?
Mr. Chair, the records from the property branch demonstrated that the Consul General was aware of the process, but not involved or in a decision-making role.
Yeah, I've got to tell you that's quite the reversal. You effectively swallowed yourself whole in this correction that you issued within a day of this committee having Mr. Clark ordering him to appear. And I'm just going to quote you back to yourself. The head of mission providing the green light for the selection of the new residents. That was based on the best available information that was provided to you at the time, but the information that you received a month later, a day after this committee passed the motion, is a complete reversal of that. Will you table for this committee all correspondence, written, electronic, or otherwise, related to this issue, and specifically to the July 25th subject matter that you write on?
Mr. Chair, of course, I'm happy to provide
Thank you very
any
much.
material that would be useful.
Thank you. And our committee has passed a motion. We require any requested documents within 3 weeks, 3 calendar weeks, not business weeks. We will now go to Mr. Jouari for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Nicholson, for joining us and clarifying. So I'd like to get an understanding of 2 things. Number one, the general role that you play and the process that you go through as far as providing update with the lens as it relates to the residents. And what I've jotted down is there seems to be some conversation on June 14th, which led to June 17 update. A motion was passed in July 24th for a study, and on July 25th, you felt that you needed to make some clarification. That's the chronologic that I have. But let's start with the role that you play within the department. What role do you play?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I serve as the Chief of Staff to the Associate Deputy Minister. My role is largely to ensure that she, in her role, has the information that she needs to really carry about her key business. And specifically with respect to this question today, my role was really that of a liaison function, just to move information between the experts, the property branch, and the minister's office.
So how often do you meet with the assistant deputy minister?
With the associate deputy minister?
Yeah.
So I work with the associate on a daily basis.
Okay, so do you guys have a weekly, or do you talk about topics on an everyday basis?
We spend a good deal of our time together and have set meetings, touch bases in the morning to go over key files for the week.
Okay, so was this one of the key files that you were providing update on June 14th?
No, Mr. Chair. On June 14th, the question came to our office from the minister's office.
Okay, so on June 14th, a question came from the minister's office making inquiry about this. Was that a regular part of inquiry from the minister's office coming to your department across many different things, and that happened to be one of them as well?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The role of the deputy minister's office is to ensure, first and foremost, that the running of the department is being handled, but also to ensure that the minister's office has the most up-to-date information on whatever might be of direct relevance to their work.
Okay, it looks like a complex structure the way you kind of depicted it by going across. Can you talk about the organization that exists in GAC, and how does your department fits into it?
Certainly, the department is organized under 4 deputy ministers, a deputy minister of foreign affairs, a deputy minister of international trade, and a deputy minister of international development. The associate deputy minister primarily supports that of the deputy minister of foreign affairs. Under each of the 4
So, I can only take so much of these being lied to in my face. I don't need to say who I'm being lied to my face. You guys see that? It was Jawari. Or being deceptive, or throwing softball questions up to Oh, Lord. And then we've got to skip through the here, we'll watch the back end of the NDP. Like, this is oh my God, the NDP pisses me off too. Like, it's
And that
hard
was
to
provided
watch.
on July 25th was pulled together over a process of the property team going through and clearly putting a more detailed explanation together. And that explanation was provided to the minister's office on July 25th.
I asked Mr. Clark at his previous appearance how he was notified that the process was occurring, and whether he could provide documentation of that notification. And he said there was no documentation. It was all done verbally. Is that convenient?
It's hard to take, guys, because, like, they're just lying to our faces. Like, I don't mind this Taylor Backrat so much, but, like, he's probably my least unfavorite person outside of at least involved in the NDP party. Like, he's
Is that
hard to tell.
appropriate given the context, given the need to document, notification of significant officials like Mr. Clark? Like, it seems unusual that something like notifying the Consul General that a process was taking place wouldn't be documented in some way through an email or a memo or something like that. It seems to kind of play into this pattern that we're seeing, which is that he actually had a more involved role than he said he had, and just none of it was supposed to be documented, because if he was that involved, it wouldn't have been following the department's procedures. Why wasn't it documented when he was notified of the process?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I'm unable to speak to whatever transactions or communications would have taken place on the ground. For that, I would need to refer the committee to my colleagues at work at our mission in New York.
Mr. Chair, do I have more time? Okay. I'm not sure how much further we can take this testimony other than just to express my total incredulity at the fact that the language used in these professional communications is so specific and seems obvious to many members of the committee that the language was meant to convey Mr. Clark's role and then was retracted. Maybe my last question will be this. If, hypothetically, Mr. Clark had been involved and had given the green light, which constitutes approval of the process, if that had all occurred, as articulated in your June 17th email, would that have been inappropriate?
I'm afraid there's not enough time for a response, but perhaps on your next round or perhaps in writing. We'll now go to our second round. We'll start with Mrs. KUSIE, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Nicholson, the Treasury Board just recently increased the approval threshold from $4 million to $10 million, as I'm sure you're aware, in 2022. How many real estate purchases did the Minister of Foreign Affairs approve on an annual basis, both before and after this significant change, please?
Mr. Chair, with apologies, that would be outside of my scope and area of expertise. I would be happy to refer the question to my colleague, Stéphane Cousineau.
That's not necessary at this time. Perhaps if Monsieur Cousineau could provide this information to the committee and table it, that would be truly appreciated. Thank you. Minister Joly was appointed as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in late 2021, and it seems shortly after this the threshold was then increased by $6 million. And now the minister suddenly is not required to approve of these costly real estate purchases. And yet the following year, Tom Clark is appointed as Consul General of New York, and immediately after this, work is underway to provide him with a new luxury apartment on Billionaires Row. Does this timing not seem a little suspect to you and seem to the point that things perfectly lined up to allow Mr. Clark to have this new luxury apartment?
Mr. Chair, I can really only speak today to my role in this process, which is limited to these two emails that have been presented to the committee. What I can say from my understanding is that this process, I believe, spanned over 10 years, was initiated in 2014, which was 8 years prior to the current head of mission's arrival in New York.
According to an ATIP the National Post received, it states that you emailed an executive in the department that the branch in charge of the purchase failed to mention the apartment was on Billionaires Row. I believe this is Monsieur Cousineau's branch. Why did you personally think that it was important for the minister to know that this was located on Billionaires Row? Why did that stand out to you to mention to her?
Mr. Chair, my summary in that email to the Deputy Minister who was acting for the Associate over that weekend was very much to convey the background and all information to ensure that he had the most detailed information to make decisions on the file. What I intended in drafting that email was simply a summary of events that had taken place to that date.
Right. In your introduction, Ms. Nicholson, you indicated that you prioritize issues for the minister. You provide a summary of issues to the minister. What is the title and name of your counterpart with the minister, please?
If I understand correctly, Mr. Chair, if the honourable member is asking for the name of the Chief of Staff in the minister's office?
That's correct, yes. Who do you have these daily conversations with, please?
Oh, with apologies, that was I was speaking to the role of the Associate Deputy Minister. My daily conversations are with the Associate Deputy Minister, who is my boss.
Okay, pardon me, but your counterpart that you have these or bring up points of interest to the minister, who do these occur with?
If I understand correctly, the question, Mr. Chair, in conveying information to the minister's office, that largely goes from our floor to our liaison unit.
I'm going to go to the process then, Ms. Nicholson. What criteria do you personally use to bring something forward to the minister? You said you provide, you prioritize issues and you provide summaries. What information, what flags you personally that something has to be brought to the attention of the minister?
Mr. Chair, the majority of the work that I do in summarizing or prioritizing are areas that the leads within the department, the branches, bring forward to my associate and identify as priorities within the department, or that might be of interest or of need to update in the minister's office. I have never personally identified a priority for the minister.
Okay. How does the minister then flag decisions that are of importance to her?
Mr. Chair, the minister, and again, my involvement with this is quite limited, my direct involvement, but my understanding of the process is that the minister conveys to her staff what her priorities are, and those come down to our department via the, we call them a liaison unit that works between the minister's office and the deputy's office.
Did the minister's office ask you to send the July 25th correction?
The minister's office, Mr. Chair, did not ask me to send any correction ever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Mr. Baines, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Madam Nicholson, can you please share with us, as you work closely with experts involved in the sale of residence, can you share your perspective on how...
This guy is such a loser. He used to be a minister. He got fired from that job. He's still an MP. Similar to like Anthony Rota or any of these shamed ministers or shamed MPs. Baines drives me nuts, guys. His fat, swollen face. Oh my God. And then he comes on here and he acts like he's asking something that is relative or sensitive or insightful or something. And to a regular person, it is completely transparent. We're going to skip his whole bit. Actually, we'll watch him for 20 seconds more just to show you like what I said. It's true. Baines is...
How the department adhered to policies, ensured that there was transparency throughout the process? And did you review the records that your office requested? Did they show any interference in this purchase by Mr. Clark?
Mr. Chair, the review of any documentation and the processes and procedures is done by my colleagues, the experts on this matter, who have years of expertise on property branch. I don't personally have the expertise to review their documentation.
Do you know that have they completed their review?
Mr. Chair, I would need to refer to my colleagues for that. I wouldn't want to misspeak. That's outside of my area and scope.
And is there a review happening right now?
Mr. Chair, the Office of the Associate requested, as I stated earlier, and happy to clarify, that following the initial summary that was provided to the Minister's Office, that a thorough review be conducted of all of the processes and procedures, including the chronology, and that was what was presented to our office, and that is what I presented on July 25th as an update to the Minister's Office.
And that's activated now. That's in action.
Mr. Chair, again, to give you...
It's embarrassing to watch. Like, Baines is an embarrassment that Canadians voted for that person. Like, whoever voted for Baines, don't vote in the next election. Like, oh my God, what bad choices you make. Whew. We've got to get on to the next witness. Like, here we go. Here's a little bit more sensible.
Associate's Office of having a more
This is
fulsome
gonna pick up
understanding
guys right away.
of that transaction, and as such, the request came from our office to pull together a detailed chronology, so that, because Mr. Chair, it's also quite complex. It was spanning over 10 years. It involved numerous decision points, and so for our office to have a clear understanding of what exactly had happened from start to finish, we requested to have that information put forward to us, and once we had it ready, we relayed that to the Minister's Office. It just happened to be on July 25th.
I looked up the definition of the term green light, and the most common North American definition is to give permission to go ahead with. Now, if Mr. Clark had given permission to go ahead with the purchase, would that have been inappropriate?
Mr. Chair, I would need to relay that question to that. I would be giving you my notional understanding, which would be probably inaccurate. So I would refer the question to my colleague, Stéphane Cousineau, if that would be acceptable.
There's only time for a very brief answer, please.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify the reality of what the consult was approving, which is essentially ensuring that his operation was not impacting, and we wanted to make sure that the plan was fine for his operation, no impact, and he was actually approving the process of proceeding, not the purchase of the actual new residence. Mr. Clark was
I'm afraid
not...
that's all we have time for. Mrs. Block, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Nicholson, I join my colleagues in expressing a deep skepticism in regards to the explanation that you have provided this committee today. I want to go back to a response you gave in regards to a question that was asked today. In response to the question about who asked for the update email sent on July 25th, you stated that it was the Office of the Associate that requested it. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, to the best of my knowledge, that is correct.
Okay, and are you the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Associate? Is that the office you are referring to?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So you're telling us that your own office requested you for the update. Is that correct?
No, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for any confusion. It was our office requesting of the leads, my colleagues in the property branch, that they provide the chronology.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a lot of confusion being created here today. In fact, I want to go back to the email that you sent on July 25th, and in that email you state that the reason for this update email was because of a conversation between Minister Jolie's Chief of Staff, Peter Wilkinson, and the Chief of Staff of the Deputy Minister, Carolina Gui. And I'm going to quote what you wrote at the top of your email. Peter, following your conversation with Carolina, and further to my email of June 17th below, I am writing to provide additional information on the purchase of a new official residence for the consulate in New York. I think we may have found the subject expert that you have referenced in your testimony earlier in this meeting in regards to who advised you on what should be in the updated email, and that would appear to be Mr. Wilkinson in conversation with Carolina Gui. So, and I hope I'm saying her last name right. So I guess I'm going to give you one more opportunity to tell this committee, did anyone in the minister's office, anyone at any level in the minister's office, directly or indirectly ask you to provide an update and to include this information in it?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the email that I provided on June 17th was an initial email to the minister's office.
That's not what I asked. I asked, did anyone in the minister's office ask you directly or indirectly to provide the information that you included in this summary?
Mr. Chair, unequivocally, no. There was no instruction on what to include. We were providing information to the minister's office. The minister's office had asked for what was the rationale and the business case for the sale of the original property purchased in 1961 and asked if the head of mission was aware.
Okay. I do have the email in front of me. When did the conversation between Peter Wilkinson and Carolina Gui take place?
Mr. Chair, with apologies, I don't have that information top of mind. I would need to go back and consult with the individuals in question, as I wasn't in that conversation.
But it certainly would have happened sometime between the June 17th and the email that you sent. And I'm going to assume that it probably took place much closer to the July 25th date than it did to the June 17th date. I want to ask you, Ms. Nicholson, if you will table all communications, emails, written documents, or phone calls between yourself and any member of the Real Property Branch of Global Affairs Canada, Peter Wilkinson, Carolina Gui, and anyone working at the consulate in New York City from June 1st, 2024 to October 3rd, 2024.
Mr. Chair, if that's within the purview of the committee, I'm more than happy to provide whatever the committee needs to do its work.
And I can assure you it absolutely is within the purview of a standing committee to ask a witness to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you for appearing before us, and thank you for your composure. I know this is not always...
We're going to have to pause this right now because Sousa's going to come in here and do what he does, which this guy is a asshole, and he's just going to come in, install, and act like he didn't understand what the questions meant, and Claire, because he's a pansy. He won't come out right and say that I just am trying to block the Conservatives and any opportunity for change or improvement in the country. He's a coward, so he does this other stuff that a asshole like he does. And gosh, we'll get through about 1 minute.
You're doing
of this
a phenomenal job, and you know you are under oath.
Sousa's a...
Madam Nicholson, did you make the decision to buy this property?
Mr. Chair, I did not make the decision to buy this property.
In the correspondence that you wrote, did that indicate that you that someone had agreed to purchase the property? Or was that, like, is that a correction, or are you trying to clarify what has taken place?
Mr. Chair, if I'm not totally sure I understand the question. Are you talking about
In your subsequent email, I've heard the term that you've been correcting the record. Are you correcting the record? Or are you clarifying what took place?
Mr. Chair, that is in fact a better use of words. The July 25th email was, as evidenced by the length of the email, far more thorough, far more comprehensive in its coverage, and was based on the information available at the time. As I said earlier in my opening remarks, in my role, I provide the best available information provided to me at the time of the request.
Is it appropriate for anyone from government that's proceeding to make a major transaction of this nature on behalf of Canadians, by saving Canadians money, no less, in this transaction to the tune of $7 million, is it appropriate to then advise or consult with the head of that particular residence who's going to then be impacted by the change? Are you requesting or did you advise for purposes of acknowledging a sale, or was it acknowledging the process by which that person would be impacted, or that department?
Mr. Chair, my colleague would be better placed to fully answer that question. I can speak to what I intended to convey as a non-expert on this matter in the email that I drafted. And as I stated in my earlier remarks, my intent in utilizing the term green light was simply to demonstrate to the Minister's office that the head of mission was aware that a process was underway that would require him to move partway through his assignment and would impact him. In order to give you a more fulsome answer to your question, I would need to refer you to my colleague, Mr. Cousineau.
Mr. Cousineau, I think you've already responded to that effect, but by all means, reaffirm if you may.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. No, absolutely. The reason why we make the consul and the head of mission aware is not only is it impacting him personally when we move, but it's impacting the whole operation of the mission, which is making even more important to keeping aware of the actual process that we're putting in place. But once again, I'm going to reiterate, there is no involvement from the head of mission in terms of the selection or the purchase of any.
And the purchase creates a net benefit to the taxpayer?
Absolutely. I could provide you the breakdown. The business case is very clear. We're actually selling, overall picture here, selling a current OR at $13 million. We're purchasing one at $9 million. We're also adding what we're going to be doing in cost saving from a renovation perspective. We're saving an annual ongoing cost of $115,000, which leads to that net present value of roughly up to $7.4 million.
So one pager on that?
We could.
If that could possibly. And now my next question is in regards to the head, to the Consul General himself. How long has this process been in play? How long have we been looking at relocating the residents?
Mr. Chair, I can take that response as well. As explained in history, we were actually looking into this file for probably the last 10 years. There was actually a report that came out on the 17th on the situation of the actual OR. So I would say it started in 2017, where there were consideration for either renovation or replacing the resident. With the COVID, the increase in terms of price of the real property market in Manhattan, there was a very detailed analysis through the governance and tools and process that we have that indicated very clearly that it was the best to actually replace with a new.
Who made the decision to buy the property?
Mr. Chair, the decision was done according to departmental authority by our DG expert of real property.
Did the Minister of Foreign Affairs make a decision to buy the property?
Mr. Chair, there was no political influence, and no, the minister was not involved.
Did the Consul General make a decision to buy the property?
Mr. Chair, no, the Consul General was not involved in the selection and the purchase of the OR.
So the process was followed, clarification was provided to ensure that people impacted would be aware and acknowledge the existence of this transaction. The transaction which ultimately benefits Canadians to the tune of $7 million, because the net value appreciation of that is in the favor of the taxpayers, and the location is in keeping with other consul generals. In fact, it's one of the less affluent residents. Is that correct, Mr. Cousineau?
Mr. Chair,
Just a
absolutely
yes or no
correct.
answer is all we have time for.
Yes.
Thanks. Mr. Barrett.
Shin, you said you receive information from subject matter experts. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So you insert the information from the subject matter experts. You are not the subject matter expert. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So that means, respectfully, that on the $9 million condo, you are not the expert.
That would be accurate, Mr. Chair.
So you received information from the experts before you sent this email on June the 17th. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, in compiling the information for the June 17th email,
It came from the experts.
That came from our property branch, yes.
So you just testified that you issued a correction to your email, and so the story that you've told today doesn't add up, just like the two emails that you've sent that don't add up. You're saying two contradictory things. That you only receive, that you only report the info that you receive, but on July 25th, you arrived at a conclusion on your own, absent the other information. So if the subject matter experts told you in June that, to use your words, that the head of mission providing the green light for the selection of the new residents, if that's what the experts told you, if you're just air traffic control and you just landed the information in the document, well, where did the new information come from? This is what doesn't make sense. Which subject matter expert told you on July 25th, the day after a standing committee of the House of Commons launched an investigation into this $9 million condo, which expert told you that Mr. Clark didn't have anything to do with it? Their name.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the experts have already been stated. Mr. Robin Dubois, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Property, and his team. And just to clarify that the request for the chronology and the information that was provided in that quite fulsome email was requested. That request had been.
Good to see you back, Kenzie. I have no idea why that would happen. We've discussed why it possibly could have happened. Strange. Big brothers out there. Don't underestimate. Anyways, back to the show.
Made.
Yeah, when? On what date? On what date was the request made for the chronology from the minister's office?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the following the initial information that was provided to the minister's office on June 17th, the Office of the Associate engaged with my colleagues in Property Branch and asked them to pull together the more fulsome explanation.
Ma'am, what date did you get the request?
Mr. Chair, I would have to go back. I don't have a date off the top of my head.
Okay, we're going to need you to table it because it just seems. And do you agree to table that with the committee?
Of course.
Okay, so it seems incredible. Like, what a coincidence that you get the information from the experts and then you circulate that in the department, and a correction is issued only after just a happenstance conversation with the minister's office, and suddenly the head of mission is no longer giving the green light. Like that simply does not add up. It's absolutely not believable. And in the absence of proof, of proof of what you're saying, it appears that you're misleading us today. Because we have your own words. We have your own words making the assertion that the green light was given by the head of mission, by Tom Clark, to buy a $9 million condo. After the Treasury Board changed the rules to allow for purchases of less than $10 million without cabinet approval. It's like this perfect puzzle was put together, and the only interruption was a standing committee started an investigation, and suddenly a correction needs to be made. Does that sound believable to you? Does this presentation of facts sound believable to you? What you say on June 17th is one thing, and then of your own volition, without any new information, at the end of July, you say the complete opposite. You assert the complete opposite without evidence that what you're asserting is true.
It would be inaccurate to say that there was no new information presented. As I have said from the outset, the email provided on June 17th was very much an initial overview, not intended to capture everything and focus specifically on the sale.
From an
I'm
overview
afraid that is
perspective,
our time.
from an overview perspective, you said Tom Clark gave the green light, and you only changed your story after an investigation was launched. That's the bottom line.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mrs. Atwin now, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for being here with us, Ms. Nicholson. And if you'd like to, clarify as well, so did you assert, was it a complete opposite, was it the opposite of what you were saying in the second, or was it a clarification?
Mr. Chair, and thank you. As said, the information provided on July 25th was very much a more fulsome business case, a more fulsome explanation that was put together by the leads to provide a detailed chronology. There was no as stated, and appreciate being here to clarify the words that I drafted, because of course, taken out of context, any snapshot moment in time can be misconstrued to be viewed as something else. I am here today to correct, as the author of the statement, what was intended, and what I intended in drafting that statement was simply to convey that the head of mission was aware, had not raised any concerns or objections with the department's plan to proceed with the purchase, and there was certainly additional information in response to the member's previous question that was brought to our office and was gathered by the property leads between June 17th and July 25th. That's why they were asked to gather additional information. So it would be inaccurate to say that the information provided on July 25th came out of nowhere. That would be inaccurate and is not the truth.
Very much. And so the green light referred to the department's plan in the process and not on the purchase of the property.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, the information conveyed to me was that the head of mission was giving the green light for the plan of the plan. He was not green lighting the plan.
Okay, thank you. And recent media reports indicate that senior officials were not informed of this purchase. Is this a gap? Is there a way to address this? Should they have been informed?
Mr. Chair, certainly it's always in the department's best interest to have as much of key information conveyed to the deputy's office as possible. With the scope of the department and the areas and issues that we navigate, it's not always possible. As stated in that article, the department has certainly taken steps, including the request from the associate's office to property branch to ensure that key real estate transactions are brought to the associate's attention.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Cousineau, while you're here with us as well, the media also often calls the new location for the official residence Billionaires Row. Why didn't you bring this nickname to your management's attention?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I know this branding that's been actually done by that market and kind of raised some question, but I want to reiterate that when the purchase was done and we investigated 21 property, when that one came out, it was actually in the district of Midtown in a very old heritage building that was built in the 50s. I think that the branding is done because of some surrounding high skyscraper that are very nearby. So it's in the same area, but it's not within the same building, which is why I suspect that there was not a lot of attention paid to it until it was raised up. So I think, could we have paid a little bit more attention to that branding? Maybe, but frankly, what I think that the investment that we're doing, the purchase was done in this old heritage building, was the right one to do, and it's going to be benefiting the taxpayer moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And on that, you mentioned in your last appearance that ongoing savings from this transaction, including how leaving the co-op model in New York could lead to tax savings under the Vienna Convention. Can you explain that a bit further?
Absolutely. I've been talking about this annual ongoing saving that we're going to be doing. First of all, this is related to the fact that the residents who are moving in is a little bit smaller. so the costs of operation are a little bit smaller as well. But also, to your point, the tax, according to the convention that you mentioned, is not it's not excluded in a co-op environment, which we are in right now, but in a condo environment, we are excluded. So that's going to be a big saving for the Canadian taxpayer moving forward.
I've got about 15 seconds left, so not much time for a question. But again, I think this is a very high-pressure environment, and I really appreciate your testimony and for the clarifications. I mean, it's very important that we understand exactly what happened here. So I very much appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Atwin. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To respect for
Finish shouldn't be an issue. Thank you.
We have the two. We have yourself, Mr. Backrack, and then Conservative and Liberal round, and then we'll resume.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we fine with that, Mrs. Vignola? If committee is fine, we'll do that, and then I'll start a speaking a list when we finish up with the Liberal round. So we will. We've pretty much burned through your 2.5 minutes, so we'll zip over to Mr. Backrack, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to the topic of Mr. Clark and the process for approving the process. Mr. Clark asserted in his testimony that he was aware of the process, but, quote, I was not part of that process. Now, Mr. Cousineau has just said Mr. Clark was approving the process for proceeding. It seems like to me, and maybe I'll pose this as a question to Ms. Nicholson, is approving a process, does that constitute being part of that process? Like if you're in charge of approving a process in your department, does that not make you a part of that process?
Mr. Chair, I'm hesitant to speak to any hypothetical situations. I can speak to what I approve and to refer specifically to the question in which I'm here today, which is specifically to speak to the 2 emails that I drafted. I drafted these emails, but other than that, in any reference to approval of a process related to property, I would need to refer you to my colleague, Mr. Cousineau.
To your understanding, did Mr. Clark approve the process based on the information that you've seen?
Based on the information that I have seen, my understanding is that the head of mission was aware and did not raise any concerns with the department moving forward to proceed with the sale and then purchase. Again, to clarify.
But not raising, did he approve the process? Did he approve the process? It's a very simple question. It's like a yes or a no. Did he approve the process?
Mr. Chair, no, the head of mission did not approve it was not in a place to approve the sale or purchase.
Why did Mr. Cousineau say that he approved the process?
Mr. Chair, I would need to refer you to my honorable colleague here who would be able to speak to his words.
Like it seems, Mr. Chair, like there's so much prevarication around Mr. Clark's actual role that it strikes the committee, and I think I can speak for some of my colleagues at least, that there's an attempt to construct a story that is, has any semblance of credibility when in actual fact, Mr. Clark was fairly involved in the process, wasn't just aware that a process was happening, but actually had some role in greenlighting the process, in fact, may have been instrumental in the process. And, it's frustrating for me because perhaps I differ a little bit from my Conservative colleagues in the question of whether the purchase of that property was in Canada's best interest, whether it was a good decision. Really, this study has evolved into a study about the actual process and whether people are telling the truth about Mr. Clark's role. And that should be something that people are very concerned about if they're watching this, because we have a set of facts and assertions that is frankly unbelievable. It's unbelievable that a senior civil servant would write a memo and misuse phrases like giving a green light or has been instrumental. So we're in this strange situation where we have testimony that doesn't line up, and where we're forced to make conclusions based on inconsistent testimony provided by Mr. Clark and yourselves today. So I don't have any more questions other than to say it's really disappointing that we haven't been able to get to the bottom of what actually happened, and instead we're stuck making assumptions. So I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. We'll now go to Mrs. KUSIE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Nicholson, it just seems very obvious that the trigger was pulled on buying the $9 million condo immediately after the Prime Minister visited Mr. Clark in New York. It seems very obvious. And as well, it seems that Mr. Clark, as well as the department, put a lot of stock in the listing price. It's just not reasonable. It's not a good accounting practice at all, but unfortunately one that the government uses consistently to count on something before it is sold. It's just accounting is not done this way. Reconciling a budget is not done this way, and the government should not be conducting their business in this way as well. It's incredibly concerning that it seems that you've lied about changing this email, changing the terminology within the email. It just seems very clear that you're not being truthful with the committee today. We just don't know who directed you to speak these truths today to this committee and to Canadians. There have been multiple scandals where the minister said she wasn't informed about things. There's the $9 million purchase on Billionaires Row. There is the warship that docked in Havana alongside Russian ships. She said she didn't know about that. And in each of these instances, including the purchase of the $9 million condo on Billionaires Row, she said that she wasn't informed. Yet all of a sudden, something goes wrong in the media or then in this committee. And then she is informed. She's informed at this time. So what you're saying today doesn't add up. What the minister is saying doesn't add up. It shows competence or lying. One of the two things. And Canadians expect their minister to know what is going on, and they expect their minister, their government, and the government's officials, no matter at what level, not to lie. So we require more information, Mr. Chair. And with this information that we are not uncovering today, I wish we could say we are uncovering and not uncovering, I would like to move the following motion: that in regards to the committee's ongoing study of the purchase of the new official residence for the Consul General, New York, the committee invite former Chief of Staff to Minister Jolie, Peter Wilkinson, former Chief of Staff of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister Carolina Guy, and Property Branch ADM, Robin Dubois, and Director General of Policy and Planning, Frank, I'm not sure if that's Monsieur or Madame, as referred to by the witness here today. But it's clear we're not getting the answers. Certainly. It's clear we are not getting the answers that we require to, first of all, determine how the minister implicates herself into these significant decisions, and then as well the inconsistency that we've seen with the wording within the email and the timing around the email here today, Mr. Chair. And so as such, I'm putting this motion forward to call these further witnesses. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
We'll get the motion distributed. Are you sending it over to the clerk?
Yes.
Okay, do you wish to speak on it, or I'll start a speaking list on this motion?
Sure, you can start a speaking list. Thank you.
Are we getting hard copies of this?
Would anyone like to speak on it, or would you like to wait a few moments? We'll suspend for a couple moments and wait for it to come up. We'll just suspend for a couple moments.
Okay, we'll skip through the suspensions. Here we go.
Motion.
And I understand the minister is actually coming on the 5th of November. Is that not correct?
That's correct. Are you putting yourself on for the speaking
No.
list? Anyone want to speak on Mrs. KUSIE's motion? We can go straight to a vote then.
Come on.
We'll go to a vote. Sir?
So the question is on Ms. KUSIE's motion. La question porte sur la motion de
There was no response, so we started the vote. Oh, I apologize. I apologize. Mr. Brock is correct. Yes.
Now you can put your hand up.
I accept full responsibilities. That's my mistake. I apologize. On the we had speaking list for Mrs. Kusie's motion, I'd recognize Mr. Souza. He finished his time. Mr. Brock, you are correct. You had your hand up. I apologize. We're not voting on it yet. You're up on Mrs. Kusie's motion.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize that I arrived literally at the tail end of this particular important meeting, but I am familiar with the evidence from Ms. Nicholson. Thank you for your attendance. I just want to reiterate the extreme importance regarding the content of my colleague Ms. Kusie's motion. This saga seems to create different layers of complexity, finger pointing, denials, mistruths, exaggerations of the truth. It's hard for this committee to determine who is telling the truth, and I understand the evidence we've heard today from Ms. Nicholson is she wants to assign herself full responsibility for attributing input directly from Mr. Clark in the acquisition of this $9 million condominium on Billionaires Row. I find that really hard to believe, given the explicit language used. This wasn't a typo scenario. It was very, very specific that Mr. Clark did have his hands all over the acquisition of this particular unit. And the evidence that we have heard so far in this particular committee seems to lead credence to his involvement. I remark and recall just how ridiculous Mr. Clark's statement was, to the effect that when he was invited for the first time to tour this condominium with a real estate agent, he had the audacity to challenge me and suggest to this committee that he walked in with the real estate agent who listed it and sold it to the government of Canada, and not a word was spoken. The two of them walked around aimlessly, not pointing out features, not communicating with each other, simply observing. That is absolutely ridiculous in the extreme. For someone to tour a property and not being guided by an agent, it only leads credence to the fact that Mr. Clark had previous knowledge about this unit, had input with respect to the acquisition of this unit. So we need to hear from further individuals to shed truth on what really transpired. I understand that the minister is about to appear to answer to these questions. I read recently in the press that her office is denying that they were even made aware that this condominium was located on Billionaires Row. Again, I find that extremely hard to believe. The minister has a penchant for basically denying anything that seems to be controversial in her portfolio, which begs the question as to who really is telling the truth. So for all of those reasons, Mr. Chair, having more witnesses coming to this committee to shed more light on the process and the acquisition of this most extravagant condominium on Billionaires Row is something that Canadians want a clear answer on at a time when we have millions of Canadians lining up at food banks, at a time when we have millions of Canadians unable to make a down payment to purchase a home, when we have millions of Canadians defaulting on mortgages, when we have all kinds of people never even thinking about acquiring the Canadian dream of home ownership, and we have Justin Trudeau awarding a buddy of his from the media, Tom Clark, of a $9 million condominium at a time when we have a number of major crises in this country. Canadians are fed up. They want this committee to get to the truth, and that's exactly what we plan on doing. So I'll be supporting my colleague's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can go to Mrs. Atwin, and then we have Mr. Souza.
Well, thank you very much. I first just want to mention that, with regards to process, that I think it's taking advantage of Ms. Vignola's goodwill for us to have
And discussions are made in conversation with the
today. Ms. Nicholson, who is
Great. So on Mr. Kuzmierczuk's amendment, which is, as mentioned, deleting the former chief of staff from the amendment. Someone wish to speak on Mrs. KUSIE.
that is a ridiculous amendment because in eliminating the former chief of staff, Mr. Wilkinson, he's the one who is named in the email. The point of this motion is to determine who directed the poor witness who is still sitting in front of us here today, Ms. Nicholson, to use the terminology green light to provide the correctional email. Where did that come from? This motion is moot without Mr. Wilkinson, so we cannot support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Before I continue, there's two chiefs, sorry, my apologies, Mr. Kuzmierczuk, there's two chiefs of staff. Is it Mr. Wilkinson or former chiefs of staff? Which one?
I thought he said former. He made it very clear former.
We have two former. Well, we have two former. Which one are you eliminating, Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
My apologies. I see one here. My apologies. I'm only reading one here, and that's Peter Wilkinson.
Two according to our clerk. Mrs. Atwin, on the amendment.
So again, it just speaking to the precedent that we've said that we don't call chiefs of staff. Again, we know the ministers are accountable to their staff. The minister is coming. She will answer the questions that we need. But what we have again is we've the other two people who are listed. I think it is important to hear from them. We've heard testimony today that speaks to their potential additional information that could inform the conversation that occurred that led to the second email. And so we're very much amenable to that. But again, the chief of staff to the minister, I don't think is going to enrich because she's going to be the one to speak on behalf and to represent her team. So based on that, I support the amendment for sure, and I wouldn't be supportive without that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brock, on the amendment.
Chair, and to my colleague, Ms. Atwin, I don't know what parliamentary precedent she is referring to, but chief of staffs are not immune. Current chief of staffs, former chiefs of staffs are not immune from attending at committee. Case in point, we had Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, attend not too long ago for a 2-hour meeting. Doesn't get much higher than Katie Telford. So again, I challenge Ms. Atwin to provide some evidence of some parliamentary precedent that has been set that the Conservatives are no longer following.
Yeah. Good point.
Mr. Sousa, on the amendment.
Yeah, if I recall, Chief of Staff Katie Telford, that was an exception. She actually offered to come forward. It wasn't a norm by which to proceed because she obviously wanted to provide some clarity. But in this case, we do have the minister herself who's attending before us, and to provide clarity and clarification and full understanding of what has taken place. And the requirement here is to enable us to determine if proper processes were followed, if the procedures were done correctly, if there was any interference by any other party by which to proceed to do so, which have restrictions based on the way we process the transaction and the decision-making of the acquisition. And I think that's been clarified at some length today and throughout the previous testimonies. Question now becomes, we want to continue to prolong this process, to continue to promote some notion that there was a benefit to any individual as a result of this transaction, because that's the only incentive that would be made or be insinuated by the opposition. And if that person or any of them were not involved in the process into the termination of the ultimate decision, then it would seem that that was not likely. But fine, there is the right, and we and as members of this committee, it's appropriate for us to have full disclosure as to how things proceeded. And the minister herself is accountable to the actions of her staff and ultimately has those rights. And certainly the opposition makes that clear almost every time when they make wild accusations about various ministers and prime ministers in terms of engagement on files that they have no decision-making authority on ever. And yet, those allegations and those connections are continuously being made, as they are trying to do again today. And that's appropriate because we have a right to determine how best to proceed and how best to clarify the process. So I would suggest that given the fact that the minister is attending and that there is going to be the opportunity to provide and question her effectively on this thing, that we proceed with the amendment to eliminate Mr. Wilkinson from and others that are just going to eat up some time on our committee and prolong the matter when we want to get down to the conclusion of the issue, which was ultimately a huge savings to taxpayers in the decisions that was ultimately made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Great. Mr. Backrack?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think we've heard points on both sides about whether the Chief of Staff should be either invited or not invited, and the best way to determine that would be to vote on it. My only point was that in her testimony, Ms. Nicholson did provide the last name for the individual whose first name is Frank, and I would just hope that the clerk or the chair could pull up that surname and add it to the motion. And I think the committee would agree to just have that done after the fact. I think we all understand who's being referred to, but it does seem funny to me to only have the first name there. That's already been dealt with? Maybe I missed that. Or are you just agreeing, Mrs. Block?
We're just kind of working on that right now.
You're working on it right now. Thank you very much. But just to restate my interest in voting on the amendment, voting on the motion as amended or not amended, and then moving on to Mrs. Vignola's motion, because I do agree with Ms. Atwin that it's somewhat in poor faith to jump ahead of our initial decision to finish the rounds of questioning and then move on to her motion. Okay, let's do it.
Amendment? We're clear on the amendment, which is eliminating Mr. Peter Wilkinson from Mrs. KUSIE's amendment, our motion.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, Madame Atwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Mr. Johari?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmichek?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Ms. Block?
No.
Mr. Brock?
No.
Ms. Kusie?
Opposed.
Madame Vignola?
Pour.
Mr. Backrack? Okay, so yeas 6, and nays contre, 4, 4.
So the amendment carries. So we're back to the original, amended motion, which has deleted Peter Wilkinson. We'll start a speaking list on that, please. Or are we ready to move ahead? We're ready to move ahead? So on the amended motion, we'll just say that is accepted unanimously. Wonderful. No, I'm sorry? Okay, we'll start a speaking list on the amended motion.
No, there's no point. It's fine. Will.
So we'll say on division then?
On division, thank you, yes.
The amended motion, as put forward by Mrs. KUSIE, deleting Mr. Wilkinson, which is amended, is passed. We finished up with Mr. Souza. We're now back to our original final rounds, which is Mrs. KUSIE for 5 minutes, then Mr. Jouari.
She moved her motion, and then that
right.
leaves
Mr.
me.
Jouari for
that
5
leaves
minutes.
me as the last one. Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jouari.
Thank you.
We
Mr.
have we have resources to 1:30, so hopefully we'll be able to get to Mrs. Vignola's.
Yes, and I'll be very short. Yeah, the last 5 minutes. Okay, so thank you very much. Madam Nicholson, your words and your explanation was interpreted and portrayed as lies. And you're disrespected. And I'm giving you the rest of the 4.5 minutes, not to talk to us, but to talk to Canadians. Because it seems when you talk to us, we have certain ways of interpreting. And I'm going to give you this opportunity to talk to the Canadian directly. And once again, explain whether by green light, you meant that there's no impact on the work that the head of the mission is doing on his work and on his personal life, and he did not have any involvement in the decision making or the approval. Madam, the floor is yours. You can take up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take the opportunity just to clarify a couple of things to ensure that there's no further miscommunications from my end. First of all, in speaking to something that one of the honorable members had mentioned, that this was a memo, just to clarify that the email sent on June 17th was not a memo. It was simply a transitory email meant as an initial first step summarizing the best available information that I had at my disposal in response to a question from the minister's office, which was focused specifically and primarily on the sale of that property. We were not looking at purchase, we were looking solely at sale. And so I think if my words drafted are read within that context, they are more easily explained. Again, the term green light was there simply to indicate that the head of mission was aware that a process was undergoing, as is our usual departmental practice. Nothing out of order there with our standard departmental practice. It is well within the realm of the normal that a head of mission would be informed that an ongoing real estate process was in play that predated their arrival and would likely impact them physically, that they would be required to physically move. And the clarification was made. There should have been a distinction in that first sentence that differentiated or drew a clearer delineation between the role of the head of mission, which was an awareness that a process was ongoing, and the work of the mission staff, which had been instrumental throughout this multi-year process, again, which was initiated in 2014, predating the current Consul General's arrival by 8 years. I'll also just state, just for clarification of timelines, that I think it's important to note that the head of mission was first taken to the property that was selected in April 2020, or April 26th of 2024. The purchase, the offer from the department to purchase was accepted on April 19th, predating his even seeing that property. I reference that because those site visits were taking place in April. My email was drafted in June of 2024 and July of 2024, long after the process and transaction had completed or had been initiated. Apologies. So just to clarify, the issue is actually far more simple than it might seem. There was an initial email that was drafted based on the information available at that time. There was, in an effort to summarize a very complex and vast process that spanned over 10 years, there was one line of a full-page email that was drafted in a way that, when taken out of context and applied to a purchase as opposed to a sale, could be misconstrued. But I would like to state again, for the record, happy to do so under oath, no one asked me to change any information. I received further information pursuant to that original email drafted on June 17th, relayed that information.
Thank you very much, J. Mac. Very well done. That's amazing.
To the best of my ability to ensure that both my bosses and my the office of the minister had the best available information. So again, just to clarify, everything to the best of my knowledge and the best of my understanding, as has been demonstrated and consistent through all testimony that has come before this committee. Just to clarify and reiterate, the head of mission was aware that a process was ongoing and was not in any way instrumental or in a position to take a decision, an actual decision, choosing a property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joiri. Witnesses, thank you for being with us. Thanks for your patience as we worked through that, the earlier motions. You are dismissed. We're now restarting Mrs. Vignola's motion. I'll start speaking us. I see Mr. Bachrach, and then Mr. Berthold, and then Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this motion proposed by my colleague, Ms. Vignola, I think there are 2 points I'd like to make. The first one is that we certainly have substantive comment on the substance of the motion and this attack on the Governor General based on her proficiency in French. However, I think the main point that I'd like to make is just that this is better placed at the Official Languages Committee. Looking at it, I don't see a very close tie-in to the mandate of this committee. And so based on that, and with all due respect to my colleague, I would move that we adjourn debate, and I would encourage her to make this motion at the appropriate place.
We will turn it over to our good friend, the clerk, and we'll have a quick vote on the motion to adjourn the debate.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, Madame Atwin.
Yes.
Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Mr. Johari.
Yes.
Mr. Kusmirchek.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Ms. Block.
No.
Mr. Brock.
No.
Ms. KUSIE.
Against.
Madame Vignola. Mr. Backrack.
Yes.
So, yeas pour 6, et nays contre 4, 4.
So I'm sorry, 6 nays?
6 yeas.
6 yeas.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so that we are, the motion is adjourned then. It's not a defeat. With that, unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your patience today. Sincerely appreciated.
Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up right there. We've got a couple of things that we'll go on. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You guys are the best chat group online, no doubt. We'll go out on this.
Hey everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
And now for this news flash.
Can I say something to all the people who thought I was a loser, Chuck?
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named Justin. What could possibly go wrong?
I made a mistake, and I'm sincerely sorry.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The world that works
The one we call Canadian. Canadians.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.